Welcome to Coffee and Regs, a CSS RegTech podcast series on moving from a tactical to strategic approach to regulatory compliance.
Hi, this is Natalie Silverman for CSS. Welcome to our next episode of Coffee and Regs. On today's episode, we're making predictions on trends in transaction reporting in 2022, from updates to SFTR to preparation for EMIR REFIT. Please welcome CSS's transaction reporting product team, Alexis Wiazmitinoff and Nicklas Nilsson. Good morning, Alexis and Nicklas, and thanks for sitting down for Coffee and Regs.
Hello, Natalie. Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Okay, so I am Alexis, the product leader for our global transaction reporting practice here at CSS.
Yep, my name is Nicklas Nilsson, and I'm a regulatory specialist focusing on global transaction reporting.
We wanted to end this year by trying to provide you with an overview of what's coming down our way next year, starting with the SFTR changes, Nicklas, right? There are some XML schema changes for SFTR, so the submission XML.
Yes, indeed. So January 31st, from a European perspective, now we're talking EU SFTR, we have some validation changes coming. It's basically ESMA correcting some of the mistakes that have been pointed out by industry bodies and the markets, that there were some inconsistencies in the validation rules and consequently also in the schema. So now it's minor changes correcting those inconsistencies and ambiguity. It's not a big change, but still it's a change.
It's the first time the schema is changed since go live, right?
Indeed. And the reason why it hasn't happened before, some of these changes were known at the go live already.
Yes.
But they were written in the level 1 text, and therefore it was not possible for ESMA to change it ahead of the go live. So it's the first review we see in SFTR. And there will also be a minor one coming later this spring. I think tentatively end of March is set as a date, with further changes to the validation rules and schema as well.
And ESMA has said that most of the changes are coming as part of the 31st of January change pack, but then that the changes in March are smaller.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that would be a smaller change than a general one.
As we record this podcast, we are still expecting ESMA to confirm the scope of changes for the March deadline.
That is correct.
Okay, so that's the first change coming up, 31st of January. Second change coming up is in the course of Q2, and that's for MIFIR, right?
Exactly. And the exact date has not been disclosed. So ESMA has published some updates to the validation rules as well.
Unusual way.
Yes. So they updated the validation rules in the library without actually publishing any news about it or making a notice anywhere else but there. But also, for reference, minor changes, they totally make sense. So it's basically validations that the firms should already have in place, like trade date needs to be after the
date of birth
for a maker or trader. So
that one is interesting.
Exactly. So it's really things that it shouldn't affect firms, but for reference, there are a handful of changes, a dozen maybe, in the validation rules that will change. So it's just a minor validation rule update that will come in the course of 2022 with, as we said, no date disclosed yet.
Yeah, but like a quarter, Q2. So we're expecting this in the new year. Above and beyond regulatory change in the validations or the schema, I think we are also expecting as part of Q1, the European Commission to endorse the final RTS and draft schema and validation rules for EMIR REFIT as well, right?
Indeed, and this is something that we are looking forward to quite a bit to actually know the expectation and have a final date where we actually need to be live. Of course, firms should already be looking at the draft changes because they're quite material. As we said, expecting the final versions to be published shortly.
So I think that is the view we have for next year so far. Anything else we wanted to mention?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that we do see in the SFTR world some divergence now between the FCA implementation of SFTR and the ESMA implementation of SFTR, where FCA will not have a January update. It will be a March update for FCA. So there will be a couple of months where we actually do have divergence between the two regulations. After the March, I think it's expected that they will be the same again, but this is, of course, driving complexity. And also on the FCA side, it has been confirmed that they do not intend to keep the reporting to MIFIR for SFTs traded with the system of central banks. So this is also something that is coming in the next year. We're seeing some divergence between the FCA and their pragmatic view on regulation and how ESMA are treating it.
Thanks, Nicklas and Alexis, for the insight into how you like your regs in the morning. For CSS, this is Natalie Silverman.
This has been another episode of Coffee and Regs, a CSS RegTech podcast series. Make sure you catch every episode by subscribing to our podcast on www.cssregtech.com or through your podcast platform of choice. Thanks so much for tuning in. This podcast is brought to you by Compliance Solutions Strategies and is for general information purposes only. All rights reserved.